I'm your host, Cole McCormack, and I'm joined by
Dylan Osvatic.
Yippee! So today our topic is analog horror the future of horror? Right off the bat, what's your answer to that?
I want to say yes, but the way that things are going, my fear is that more likely it's going to be a passing phase. I really don't think we're seeing enough innovation to justify it being the primary means of creating horror right now, especially with how fast things move. I'm starting to wonder if there's going to be a new type of horror that comes out within the next 2 to 5 years that's just going to completely wipe analog horror off the map.
Because digital horror has been making a bit of a rise. Have you seen those? Where I saw one. It's called like Interloper, where it's a TF2 one. There's another TF. Most of them are Gmod and TF2 because it's all open source. You can do whatever you want with it. But yeah, everything that I've seen, it's all just been a lot of digital horror stuff that's been rising up.
I think the one that I saw, I can't remember the name on it. I want to say Nexpo did an episode on it, but it looked like an arena shooter that I think someone's soul was trapped in or something. I forget the specifics.
Oh, was it the Doom Wad?
Yeah.
My House?
Maybe it was My House. It was something like that. But video games are taking up a huge amount of space in the horror scene.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about analog horror versus digital horror, I want to make a video on it, but I think there's a grander scheme of horror that I think is the big face of horror right now, which I call informational horror, which is more like the idea of telling a story through pieces of information rather than directly pointing a camera at the action of what's happening.
Like Mystery Flesh Pit?
Yeah, I think and I mean, you look at Local 58, what's the one that Linkara did, the Blizzard of...
Oh, Winter of 83?
Winter of 83. Yeah. Almost all of them, they employ this tactic of here is a datagram from a laboratory, here is found footage, and it's never a direct look into the world that you're seeing, but every single one of them represents another universe through tiny pieces of information. And I think that's kind of the huge wave of horror right now. I don't know what we're gonna see come after this, but I definitely think we're going to see something that's even more abstract. I'm not sure that we're going to just return to straightforward direct horror movies,
Yeah. So my answer on it is yes and no. I think like anything, it's dependent on the generation that watches it. So I grew up watching VHS tapes. I'm assuming that you did too, right?
For the most part.
Yeah, for the most part. And I think that's going to fade away as we get older and the next generation comes up. And I'm sure we're going to see a lot of YouTube horror-centric stuff and Coco Melon horror centric stuff. But I think that's kind of where it's gonna go. But I think we'll always have horror movies. Will they be scary? I don't think that, because we can only really do so much with the genre,
right?
That it's okay, great, another movie where we have the same jump scare setup and everything. I think that's slowly gonna fade away and we're gonna see a different medium entirely. So I think we should kind of now focus in and go through the history of analog horror and then kind of figure out how we got to where we're at. What do you think is the first analog horror? More subjective than anything.
Yeah, I mean, if you want the classic answer of it's Blair Witch Trial, because that's the first found footage film, I'd agree with that. But I think you could really trace it back to the radio play of War of the Worlds. And I mean, that's the beginning of information is horror, because this was a broadcast in another universe. It wasn't a direct. It was meant to be a direct telling of a story, but based on the context around it, it became this creation of another universe through information.
For people that don't know, just in case you might not be aware of the War of the Worlds thing that happened, you want to give a bit of context? It was Orson Welles, right?
Yeah. I believe he was the one reading it.
Yes.
I'm not certain. Okay.
Yeah,
it was...
I think he orchestrated the whole thing. I think that was his whole...
Was that... I forget what decade that was.
20s, I want to say. 'Cause it was right before... I think he did it before Citizen Kane. I think that was his first thing.
Yeah, it was really early in just the history of media as a whole, I guess.
Yeah.
But basically, he
recorded
wanted to...
media.
Yeah, recorded media, fair. But he wanted to create a radio play of his novel War of the Worlds, and he intended for it to be a straightforward broadcast that just kind of described or was a radio play, but most of the audience tuned in after the intro that said the following is a fake play, blah blah blah, making it clear that it's fiction, and they tuned in and they were oh, the world is ending. People were genuinely concerned that it was over, and then I guess it kind of stuck around as an idea because people were oh, we convinced them the world was actually ending. That is probably one of the most powerful forms of horror,
Yeah.
is changing reality, you know?
Yeah. And, you know, like you said, you know, obviously Blair Witch Project, getting into that. But I think a little bit before that, or maybe it was after, I'm not too sure, there was that one BBC thing with the ghost. Remember?
Yeah.
I don't know. Was
I know
it
what you're
called
talking
Night
about.
Watch or something?
That sounds right.
Or like
yeah.
Ghost Watch. I don't know what it was.
something in that
I'll have it
effect.
pop up on screen right
Uh-huh.
now. Apologies for the listeners only, but but yeah, no. So I think that was also another one where it was like you're believing that this is real. You're
Yeah.
seeing it from a media perspective, from an outside perspective, as opposed to, like you said, here's a literal camera pointed on you. There's a spooky ghost behind you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you don't really get that. And that was also something too, where it's like the ghost was taking over the broadcast,
Right, yeah.
Which you start to see where it's like, oh, the ghost is taking over this
Yeah.
tape.
The alternates are
Yes,
modifying
yeah.
the television broadcast.
Yeah. So I think then, in my opinion, where it goes from there after Blair Witch, and even before Blair Witch, there was the last broadcast.
Yeah.
Which is a not so good take on that. But it was
Yeah.
technically found footage, even though if you want to get really into it, really film dorky, I don't know if you've ever heard of the McPherson tapes.
I've heard of them. I don't know
Yeah.
anything.
It's the very first found footage movie, and it was in the 80s that they did it.
Okay.
And there's a few shots that are really good. There's this one where they're in basically this alien invasion happens while this family's like celebrating a birthday.
Oh, okay.
And that's the setup. It's about an hour long. So if you want to just watch it, you can. I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube in its entirety.
Okay.
But what's cool about it is there are a few shots where they're in the woods and they see the spaceship and they see these aliens walking into it. For the 80s, for a no-budget movie, it looks really good.
Okay.
But then the ending is really bad, where like they're all, I mean, it's kind of haunting in terms of story. They're all sitting at the table and kind of accepting like we're going to die. So we'll all just kind of hold hands and just sing happy birthday, because it's like, it's kind of eerie in that context.
Yeah.
And then you see the cameras like set down perfectly to where the aliens can be seen walking in.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, it's just kids in Halloween costumes. And that totally ruins
the
it for
ending?
me.
Oh,
it should have
man.
just ended where they open the, like the door opens and then it cuts to black. That would have been the most effective ending. But because
Right.
we see the aliens and like lighting just like this, where it's like perfectly lit, you're like, oh, come on. I could see where the mask ends.
Oh.
But people thought it was legit.
Right.
Because the marketing was so well done,
So
where
good,
they only
yeah.
showed them walking into the spaceship. What I'm getting at, though, is I think found footage really played a factor into
Yeah.
that.
And I think the one thing that I'm assuming unintentionally found footage did to set up the entirety of like analog horror is it almost killed the idea of accepting film as reality, because like post Blair Witch and like finding out that's fake, and like post internet as a whole, like nobody believes anything. Like you see
Yeah.
footage of anything and you're like, yep, that's fake.
That's AI.
either AI, Photoshop, some sort of film editing. Like there's
Yeah.
no such thing as like, oh man, I can't believe that really happened. Like I think Blair Witch almost single-handedly killed that. If not like the creation of, what are they just called, VHS? It's like that series of 3 like found footage films.
Yeah. I
think
did
it's
a whole
called-
video on just one segment, the Ratma
Okay.
one, and that
Yeah.
one was really wild.
Yeah.
But yeah, completely.
I think, yeah, like beyond that, like the idea of reality was dead, and you kind of, now you really have to suspend disbelief to really
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Well, like even Cannibal Holocaust, which I might have to censor that title
Yeah.
because of YouTube, but you know, people like the director, didn't he go on trial because they thought he actually killed the actors?
they
and
were
they
like,
had to,
whoa. Yeah.
It's like, dude, it's obviously an edited movie. There's reverse shot dialogue scenes.
Yeah.
Like, come on, dude.
And didn't they really kill animals in that one though?
Yes, they did. Yeah.
Okay, I was
Yeah.
gonna say that definitely.
Yeah,
helps
but they
with
thought the actors
authenticity.
were dead, and it's like, guys.
Whoa. He's on trial. Like he's right here.
But yeah, I agree though with what you're saying though, how it's like something like that could be seen as real in the 70s.
Yeah.
You know, and like even The Exorcist, how that still has the reputation of being the scariest movie of all time.
Yeah.
And then nowadays for it, I think it's still very frightening, but like I said, I made a whole review about it. It's more disturbing than actually scary.
Yeah.
Like seeing this innocent little girl go from being this innocent little girl to being this like monster, this demon. You know what I mean?
Yeah. One other thing that's important to note, like in that, I think if we're going like chronologically, I think we're probably about in like the very early 2000s, late 90s, because Blair Witch was what,
99.
99.
Yeah.
And then Candle Cove. I mean, that's later in the 2000s, right?
I think it was maybe, because I know it was a creepypasta for
so it
first, and then
it
I
was
know they
written out in like early 2000s video, late.
But I'm pretty sure that was like maybe 09, maybe
Okay.
2011. But yeah.
But I think in the early to mid 2000s, a really important event and I think this is inseparable from analog horror, is like the idea of an alternate reality game.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that hit the mainstream like crack in the 80s. Like, I mean, if you look at like the people that were, I don't know, I really wish I could attribute like the original people that did it, but I'm not as familiar with that area. But I know that Microsoft used it to advertise a Halo game.
Yeah, they did the bee thing. It was like,
Swarm. Yeah, I don't remember the details, but like Nine Inch Nails did it for an album.
Yeah.
And I think
I'm trying to think, because I know the Blair Witch did it first.
Yeah,
I think they're the very first ones to do it, at least for marketing.
Yeah, and I mean, yeah, for marketing it was huge.
Yeah.
But and then from that you'd see like the whole Ben Drowned ARG, that was mid 2000s if I recall correctly. I think that was like almost inseparable, because even now like you see like the specter of like alternate reality games in a lot of new horror, where it's like there's a specific desire to constantly try to tie your analog horror, your ARG, into some sort of previous folklore.
Yeah.
I mean, everything has to reference the Bible. Everything has to I believe Ben Drowned references the Bible. Mandela Catalog at some point references the Bible.
I think the basis of it is the Bible, because I think the whole thing is like Jesus is replaced by an alternate. I think that's the concept. But
that I think you can directly tie to ARGs, because that was part of the way that they told the story, was that like you have a good prediction of what's going to happen next based on if you can recognize it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think one of the most important non-media ARGs to point out would be Cicada 3301.
Yeah.
That was huge into the occult. They referenced everything. They were talking about like, Talmudic texts. They referenced Aleister Crowley. Like, there's very clearly a strong desire to tie yourself into the occult and religion and whatever other metaphysics you can attach yourself to.
Was that ever revealed what that was? Cicada, whatever.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think...
Is it still ongoing? Because I feel like
technically,
okay.
From what I remember, there's like one like puzzle that like no one has solved in like 15 years because it's just stupid hard, and everyone just gave up because they're like, this is unsolvable.
Yeah.
Like, it's not even worth it. Whatever cult I'm gonna get abducted into probably isn't that cool anyway. I bet they don't even have fruit punch like that. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, but I think that's really important in the chronology of analog horror. But I think probably late 2000s to early 2010s is when like it came into its own as like a distinct, unique concept.
Yeah, because I think Candle Cove is kind of where that started.
Yeah, for sure.
Which, by the way, what an incredible short story.
That's great.
The ending is so perfect. If you haven't read it, go read Candle Cove. It's one of the few creepypastas that holds up.
Yeah, like one of two, dude.
Yeah, Pen Pal's the other one. If you've ever read Pen Pal, I have it as a book. Because the guy actually got like a publishing deal from it, and then he's like, "Oh, I'll expand upon it a little bit." Because the original one was basically a full-length book. It was so long, but I'll explain Pen Pal really quick just to kind of get through the gist of it. Basically, the idea is this kid is in kindergarten and he writes. They have this class assignment where you write a letter or whatever, like a picture of yourself on a balloon, then you let it go, and then someone would find it, and then they would like kind of write back to you. It's like a Pen Pal.
Yeah,
and the guy gets it back, but then he gets all these pictures of himself and like his mom at like the supermarket, and he's like 6. And then it continues throughout his whole life. He keeps getting stuff in the mail, like pictures of him wherever he goes, and it like progresses more and more into like his teens. It follows his and basically his entire adolescence from like age 6 until like he's older, and then something horrific happens. Like the ending, it's one of the most. There are a lot of points where crazy stuff happens and you're not sure if it's real or not, but then the final image that you get is like the most realistic depiction of something happened, like a true crime type thing, where it isn't sensationalized. It isn't like their eyes were bleeding and then a nostalgia critic popped up out of a VHS tape. It's such a real, and the way that the author presents it is so blunt of the specific death. I'm not going to say what happens, but the way that it happens is so like it focuses on the little things like a mom crying and like little stuff like that. It's like, this is so well written and it's so perfect. And I remember reading that being like, this is online for free.
Yeah.
And when he got the publishing deal, I immediately bought that book and I have it on my shelf because I'm like, this is one of the best written horror novels I've ever read in my entire life. So Pen Pal, go check it out. You should check it out.
I gotta check it out. Yeah.
It's on Creepypasta literally for free.
Wow.
You can read it in like an afternoon if you just sit down and read it. But anyways, Candle Cove for sure is where that comes from.
Yeah.
Really quick, any other creepypastas you like?
I'm not I mean, I'm not super familiar with creepypastas, but like,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna keep saying Ben Drowned because I do like that one, even if
Yeah.
a lot of people hate on it for being pretty cheesy. But like for its time, like you gotta admit, like
The imagery's solid.
the imagery is
Yeah.
solid. The depth of like once you get past the video game part and you
Yeah.
start looking at like the websites and like the whole like cult aspect of it, like that was impressive for 2009
Yeah.
or whenever that happened. But no, I think you hit the nail on the head with Candle Cove being huge. And I think that ties into another kind of like sidestep from analog horror that's important to note, which is found footage as a whole.
Oh, yeah.
People are obsessed with that.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can see the overlap in like the
My
YouTubers
work.
that talk. Yeah.
You can see it in my work. Dude, half the episodes are all just found footage.
Yep.
That's kind of the whole gist of it, but yeah.
And I mean, even just YouTube creators as a whole that are like, here's found footage, here's analog horror, here's an ARG, and like it's those three that
Yeah.
almost encapsulate like entire YouTube channels.
Yeah.
I mean, Nexpo does it.
Wendigoon?
Wendigoon does it.
Yeah.
Jorge.
Nightmind.
Nightmind.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of them are like just hyper focused on those three as a whole.
Yeah.
And I think they're pretty inseparable at this point.
I agree, yeah.
But yeah.
So Candle Cove was, if I'm wrong, I will have a disclaimer up on screen, was done by the same guy that did Local 58.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
But that makes sense.
I'm like 90% sure that's the meme, because I remember like he had something where Channel 58 was, or I think it was Channel 57 was the channel that
Candle Cove
was on, and then
Yeah, that sounds
58
about right.
was then a separate thing. And then that was kind of how 58 got a lot of clout, was because of Candle Cove.
Cove,
And then it became more popular than Candle Cove, which is really funny. But yeah, so I think Local 58 was the first. I want to say
I'd probably say so, unless
Yeah.
I'm missing like some younger. And I mean, if you want to count like all the Slenderman, Marble Hornets,
Marble
12
Hornets.
Tribes.
I feel like
or
we
Tribe
have to
12.
talk about Marble Hornets before
Yeah.
we get into that. What's your take on Marble Hornets? I'm just curious.
I didn't hate it. It suffers as far as basically a student film with student acting and a student budget and student recorders and everything. But like the premise is pretty well done. I mean, coming from Waukesha, there's kind of a bitter taste when it comes to Slender Man as a whole.
Yeah.
I think that kind of tinges my view of anything related to that, where
It
I'm just like,
does,
this
yeah.
is a little like, I immediately kind of like cringe when I hear it. Not
Yeah.
in like the standard cringe way, but it's kind of like maybe a touchy topic.
Yeah.
And like I think that kind of
I was like just down the road
Yeah,
from
me
that
too.
when it happened.
yeah, I mean, it was 5
Oh, that's
minutes away
right.
from here. I
Yeah.
literally biked there like the next day.
Yeah,
Like it
'cause
was close.
That night I was sleeping over at my grandma's house, and then that like the next morning all the news broke, and it was like,
What?
She's like, that's just down the road. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I know what a Slender Man is.
yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, but that was one of the first. Not to get too into this, but that was one of the first things that actually like shook me to my core as a
Yeah.
kid. And it was like, this is real, because it was someone our age, roughly,
Pretty
maybe
much,
a little bit
yeah.
older, maybe a little bit younger. I'm not too sure, but
Yeah.
like that was something where it was like. That I kept talking to my mom about it, because I was like so freaked out by it, and she's got to the point where she's like was like, can you just stop talking about it? It's almost like weirded out, but it was like it just struck a chord with me, because it was like, this is horrific, and this
Yeah.
is so sad and depressing. And
No, yeah, I remember giving my mom like every like Scholastic horror book I got from the Scholastic
Yeah.
store. I was like, you need to like keep these away from me, because I was like freaked out for like months after that.
Yeah.
And I mean, even as like just a physical character, he was terrifying as like
yeah,
a
yeah.
10-year-old. Like there was, I have it like burned into my retinas, is one photo of Slender Man where he's like falling from the sky and he's got like
oh, I've never
like
seen
arms
that. I've never
outreached.
seen that.
I don't remember where it was from, but like I just remember having a visceral reaction where it was
Yeah.
like Smile Dog never had that kind of feeling to it.
Yeah, Jeff the Killer always kind of weirded me out, but
the
yeah.
Rake was okay, but like Slender Man got me, bro.
Yeah.
That was the one that just looked
The one with
horrific.
Slenderman that always got me is the one where he's like standing next to like a little girl. And he's
Yeah.
like arched over, and the
Like-
costume is so good that it looks legit. Because like a lot of the time with that character,
Yeah.
it's just like it's so clear it's like a mask. So
Yeah,
there's
you
like
got-
wrinkles on it.
Yep.
But with some of the best ones, there's nothing with that. It
Yeah.
looks like an actual face.
Yeah.
But yeah, Marble Hornets, I'm a big fan of. I watched this whole breakdown of it. It was like 6 hours
Yeah.
long.
Was it the Nightmind one?
It might have been.
I have seen all of the Nightmand content on that.
It might have been the first, because I remember it was an older video that he had.
Yeah, it's pretty old.
But man, I watched that like all the way through, and I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah, it was definitely a lot cooler.
Yeah,
like 4 or 5 years ago.
And I think it still mostly holds up. But I think the biggest thing, and I was just talking to Alana about this with the McJuggernuggets Psycho series. I don't know if you've ever watched that stuff. But the problem with that is that because it was happening simultaneously and like the Twitter account was a thing, that you could really only watch it at that specific point in time, and that now it's like, because you're just watching the videos. You're not actually immersed in a lot of the stuff. Like with McJuggernuggets, the whole thing was like, oh, he's kicked out of his house. He's living in a tent now. And he's like live tweeting like, I think my dad's coming here and he's going to, blah, 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 blah. And that was one where it's like, now you kind of watch it. It's like, dude, it's 1,000 videos that you have to sit through because they're 20-minute long daily uploads. Plus the Psycho ones where it's like his dad's like shredding his games with a lawnmower.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, because I want to make a video about that. And then I started to write it and I got like 7 pages in and I'm like,
this is exhausting.
I can't cover all the daily uploads because it's way too much. But Marble Hornets is the exact same way. Yeah. Where it's like, you can't go back to the Twitter and try to like, read it and then I'll watch this one. It's too much work.
There was I wish I could credit the author. There was a scholarly text that I read that was literally about like the ways that multimedia stories like that are represented, and one of the biggest pitfalls that they analyzed was that when you have something on YouTube, on Twitter, on Instagram, on Tumblr, I mean on MySpace at this point, like it's everywhere, you can't keep up. And I think what happens is that's why some of those YouTube channels are so popular, because they condense it all into 1 hour long videos that you can watch and you're like, wow, that's really cool, and you never end up experiencing the full thing. I think Alan Tutorial, it was a huge victim of that. That was a great series. 100%, I like that one. But I don't think I ever like went through the Twitter and it was like, if I wanted to get the full story, it's like 3 YouTube videos, 2 tweets, 3 YouTube videos, 2 tweets, and you got to like scroll all the way down through the Twitter, line up the dates, write this down. It's like, it's homework, dude.
It is. It's homework. And it's like, sure, it pays off in the end once you finally do it, but you were better off just watching it live as it unfolded. Like I said with the McJuggernuggets thing, like, dude, I made a Twitter account just so I could understand what was happening. And that was a series where I believed it was real for the longest time until the very end, when he pews his dad at the end, and then I'm like, oh, it's fake, because there's no way, because it was such a highly like edited video that you're like, okay, come on. But still, I do want to make a video on that eventually. Just it'd have to be a massive project for sure that I just put a month of time into. But
I think there is a rewarding aspect to when they do kind of have a very broken up story. I don't know if you're familiar with The Sun Vanished.
Yes, that's a really good one.
That's one of those where like you can sit down and like at the end of the day it's like 5 Twitter accounts, and if you just pull them all up on different tabs of your browser or whatever, and you scroll to the bottom and then you just flick between them, like in maybe like 2 hours you can get the gist of the story, and like it's good.
Could you imagine if Twitter had a sort by oldest feature?
Oh man.
Dude, we would see literal like revolutions happen. People would find old tweets.
It would be
it would be done.
Well, all those tweets are gone now. Did you hear that they wiped
everything
from 2013 or something?
The Ellen DeGeneres Oscar picture is gone. It's lost media.
Think about how many Chief Keef tweets we probably lost in the Great Purge.
That thing he had with Selena Gomez was so funny.
Oh yeah,
legend. Anyways, and like, what was that one thing with Katy Perry? She's like, I hate that one song. It's all about drugs or whatever. And then she's like, sorry, Chief, I didn't know it was you.
He gets the pass, bro.
Anyways, before we get off topic, because we're already way off topic. Well, we were just at Channel 58, right?
Yeah, Local 58.
Or Local 58. I think
it's the point across.
So Local 58, I think, is the antithesis to that, where you have to go on all these different social media platforms.
It's just right there.
It's like 6 videos. Basically, it's like 7, and you can just watch the whole series, and it's like, I get it. I don't need anything else. What's your favorite episode from that? Like, or what's the most effective in your opinion?
I believe it's the first one, which is your destination is behind you.
That's a good one.
I have shown that video to everyone I know at this point. I'm like, you gotta sit down and watch. It's like an episode of Twilight Zone. It's such a perfect concept.
I'm mad I didn't come up with that myself.
It's so well done, and it's short. It's something that I'm like, you need to sit down and spend 6 minutes watching this with me, and I want to see your reaction because it's so good. It's perfect.
For me, the one that's always stuck out to me is the one with the skeleton, the little cadaver. I think his name is Cadaver, where he's walking through the graveyard.
The cartoon one,
And he looks down, and he sees that like that hollow, you know, thing. There's like that embryo in there. You're just like, what? And then when the moon pops up, it's like, I get it now. And just the whole thing, it's so well paced. And that's something too that a lot of analog horror stuff doesn't do well, is pacing. Where you're just like, I get what's gonna happen. I'm waiting for the scary face in the corner. Please just like get to it. That's something that even my work, I think I kind of struggled with. That's why in episode 2 of my series, which for those that may not know, I have an analog horror series called A Town Called Whitewater. The final episode for that first season is out.
Fantastic series. I love it.
You're in it. You can't say that.
I can too.
Chill. But like that second episode, because the first episode's about 2 minutes. Second episode is 8 minutes. And I'm like, this should have been cut down. The more and more I watch that, I'm like, there's way too much. Like the looking for livestock scene goes on for way too long. That's why every episode from then on was 5 minutes exactly.
Yeah. And I think it's probably, I notice this in a lot of different series, is that when they do the thing where it's like, this tape got overdubbed, like in order to set it up to feel authentic, you have to have irrelevant information, relevant information, and then usually more irrelevant information at the end, and balancing it between like, okay, there was 10 seconds of irrelevant information, it feels fake, I'm not sold on the concept. That sucks. But then when you have too much, it's like, can we just get to the point already? I'm sick of seeing these two dudes talk about mountain biking. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's so, I can't imagine. I feel like I've never seen a perfect balance of it, and I wonder if there even is one. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because like with episode 3, I was like, okay, how do I jam pack this lore with this found footage thing where you see these guys going mountain biking? It feels real because a lot of it was at that start, I'm assuming, like they just kind of talked and you know whatever, like they barely even cared about the camera, and I think that really added to it. And then as soon as that thing happens, you're kind of like, oh, I get it now, why this is important, because I want it to feel like it's irrelevant information going into more relevant. But anyways, with Local 58, that stuff, almost none of it is like, oh, it's overwritten. Like it's almost all purposeful and it's all what you need to see. So what was next, do you think? Because I feel like there was one more. Was it Gemini Home Entertainment?
Yeah, Gemini is probably like the direct sequel. I think
I probably should have done research, but I think I texted you last night, and I think I said, what do we talk about? And then didn't you say JPEG Mafia fashion? I'm like, I don't know what any of that means.
I hate how he dresses now. Those red boots drive me nuts. I'm a dedicated Peggy wardrobe hater, bro. I got beef with that dude over what he wears. But
yeah, no, we literally were like, let's just talk about this, because I was going to make a whole video about this, and then I figured this might be a better format. I'm probably still going to make
a whole video about it. So
I just mean the specific, is it the future of horror? So, but yeah, I think Gemini's next. And
yeah, I think so. I feel like all I'd have to do is just pull up the Nightmind video catalog and just trace it chronologically, because he's so on the dot about that. Like he's very tuned into what's going on in there. I feel like there's only been like 3 or 4 series that I have loved that he hasn't talked about, but he's usually on the dot about that. He almost like curates like what analog horror is at this point, because he's probably the biggest voice in it.
100%, Has he covered Vita Carnis yet?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm not that big on his stuff. I like Wendigoon a little bit more, just because with his stuff, I'm able to have it on in the background.
Yeah, Nightmind is so in depth.
It's very like you have to watch it, and for me, it's like, oh man, I'm writing and then I'm looking and
I'm more into like super in depth stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, I usually just watch the like Nightmind always says like, go watch the series and then come back, because there's no point in just having me explain it to you, because it's not nearly as cool then. Yeah, and I think he's right about that. But yeah, you're right that Gemini is probably the next one. Yeah, I believe it was Gemini. It was this last year when I was in the dorm. I think it was Gemini that did this live stream about a satellite like landing on Venus or something, and I remember sitting there waiting for the premiere to start, watching the video, and just feeling robbed of my time, where I was like, I spent 10 minutes waiting for this to show up. I spent 7 minutes watching the premiere. I went back and rewatched the whole thing, and I felt like no useful information was collected, and I just felt so robbed. But like otherwise, it's a very good story. I appreciate it.
That is my biggest gripe with that, is that there's so much to Gemini that it's like, okay, what's relevant, what isn't? I basically need someone to curate it for me.
Yeah, it's because just too much to single-handedly. Yeah.
Like, I remember that one episode where they spend so much time on the computer trying to like retell a story.
Yeah.
And it's like, you guys, I get it. You know, it's going to be creepier and creepier. And I think it was when it was first starting out, so it's not really fair to rip on it.
Yeah.
And I do like the series, don't get me wrong, because when it hits, it really hits.
Yeah.
Like the one where it's like that like nervous system where she's like sitting in the chair. So effective.
Such a good, just aesthetically so displeasing that it's perfect. You just look at it and you're like, ugh.
It's the strongest point of that entire series is its imagery of the wood crawler, where it kind of comes through that that door, you know what I'm talking about, right? Where it's in like a laundry room or something. The guy where he's going, help, you know, he's in the cornfield, but he's just kind of standing there. So effective.
Yeah.
The idea of if you hear them, it's already too late.
Yep.
Or like if they're getting farther away, it means they're getting closer. Like stuff like that, it just is incredible. Like I have chills just thinking about that.
Yeah.
And the whole thing with the video game too.
Yeah, I was just gonna bring that up.
Yes.
I played the game and like it adds to it. And I mean, the ability
that's
to
the ARG connection too, since we're kind of connecting what we're talking about.
Right. And the ability, just it's so impressive that like they are so good at videography, and then to have a game that works. Like programming game is not easy. Creating good looking footage like that is not easy. Being able to do both is just nuts. Like that's just so impressive.
Yeah,
to me.
I agree.
I feel like I've never been so aware of what's going on inside my body than seeing that nervous system.
Yeah.
I was like, I do not want to be in this flesh prison anymore.
Right.
Like, I'm out.
Yeah. So I think where Gemini really exceeds where some other series like Mandela Catalog don't is the look of the actual footage and how it looks like actual analog.
Right.
It looks like CRT and that, you know, VHS type aesthetic. It nails that. Whereas Mandela, it's either too degraded to where it's like, was this just run over by a truck? Or it's not at all degraded and it just it's like he threw like a filter over it. You know what I mean? At least in the earlier seasons. I haven't seen the newest one yet, but I remember the most recent one I saw was pretty, it looked pretty good. So
I mean, Mandela's been getting a lot more abstract, I think. Like they're very quickly approaching a very Lynchian sort of.
They're almost like not even analog horror at this point.
Yeah.
It's like it just is separate from it entirely.
Thing, which is neat. Like I
like it a lot. Yeah, it's evolving, which I always dig. You can only do the whole something cool, you know, something normal, something scary format. You know, the rule of three. You can only do that so many times before it gets old.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I don't want to say too much about it because I want to do a whole video about it, but I think one of the most like prescient topics discussed in analog horror as of like the last 8 years is like the idea of humans being replaced is such a being imitated or replaced is such a it's a constant topic in almost every series that you see, or humans being converted into a computer or turned into a monster or monsters turning into humans. And like we've seen it like with The Thing, it zombies, vampire, like the whole 9 yards. But like I think this most recent iteration, it definitely stems from like current cultural concerns, which is artificial intelligence replacing humankind, getting your brain uploaded into a bunch of test tubes or whatever computer nonsense is going on. I think that analog horror is really just a very strong mirror for what's going on in the world right now.
Yeah. So moving on, then I think, should we get into Mandela a little bit more in depth?
I think Mandela is probably a good place
because I think that's the next one, at least from what I remember.
And I think afterward we can just go back and fill in like the littler parts, because I feel like Local 38, Mandela, Gemini, like those are the huge ones.
Are the big three.
Yeah.
Maybe touch upon the what's the one where it's the Nixon? No, what is it? Monument Mythos.
That one's great, but that one's a lot smaller.
Yeah, and like Vita Carnus, I think, are like the two other smaller ones. But with Mandela, I feel like that really popularized what I consider the worst tropes in analog horror.
The distorted face.
Yeah, not that it's a bad series by any means. I don't want to sound like I hate it. I don't at all. I think it's amazing. But in the fact that it takes place in Wisconsin, Wisconsin mentioned.
Shouts out Wisconsin.
But like, for me, I think that people got the wrong idea. This is not, again, on the creator at all. What I'm getting at is I think that it's the audience perception of it was, this is why people like it.
Yeah.
It's because of the distorted
faces
face.
are funny. Yeah.
Yeah. And, the faces and the, I'm in your home and
the
like
government report or warning or whatever.
Yes. And that type of stuff.
Surface level tropes. Yeah.
Whereas what I think actually made it work was the stuff where it's like, if you see a person inside your home that looks like you, run away and hide.
Yeah.
Lines like that, even though I kind of paraphrased it.
Yeah.
The writing is what amplifies the horror, and I think the presentation maybe played a factor, but something that's unique about Mandela Catalog is that there's no found footage. In that
Right.
first one, at least.
Yeah.
Like, really, it's just audio and pictures.
Yep.
Because I think he said he made it on his iPhone. I'm pretty sure that's what he said.
I have no idea,
Yeah.
but I mean, that sounds right.
And that it was like he used like a photo editor app to get like the distorted faces, and that was it. He basically just did it all in like iMovie, I guess,
Yeah.
or whatever software he used. But
And I think it's a very like new kind of proletarian concern that we see with a lot of media right now, is that like when you are kind of the progenitor of a new concept that is very easy to replicate, very easy to reproduce, everyone's going to copy it. I mean,
Yeah.
you kind of saw it with like the whole like Plug and B, Playboy Cardi style like music is like, yeah, these are major minor fifth chords, the most basic drum beat you've ever heard, and the same distortion on every single track on the mixer. Anyone can do it. And everyone does do it. It's just that there's only so many people that do it well and add to it and make it unique.
Well, it's like, I'm going to come up with two comparisons really quick. It's like rap in the late 2010s, how every flow was like that triplet flow, that you know, and how everyone was doing it, but the best of the best got noticed.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, was that Migos that started that, right?
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit,
I mean,
yeah,
you could probably trace it back to Lil B, way
I'm
back
sure,
into the...
yeah. I'm saying like in terms of popularizing it.
Yeah.
The other thing is, there was this subreddit that was fairly big for a while that I was a part of, and it's why Pesticide has like 1,000 some views or whatever. It was called Folk Filmmaking, and it started out where it was a group of filmmakers, and I ended up getting bunched into that because someone posted my thing there, and then it blew up from there. But is that it was like these filmmakers who just put their stuff out for free. They aren't asking for anything. They're not like trying to plug something. It's just, here's my work. Watch it if you want. Enjoy it. It was like that. And gradually, though, what happened, the downfall of it was it was ego played a big factor, because it was like, oh, I made 7 feature films in a year, and it's like, congrats, they're all garbage. Like, it has every flaw of every student project where it's, the pacing is garbage, you know, the editing is awful because you're rushing it, you know, you're not taking your time. And that was a big pitfall that happened. Also, it was oversaturation. There would be like 20 posts a day of all these feature films, and it's like, guys, that's an hour and a half to like 3 hours with some of these. I don't have time to watch it, especially when the thumbnail is not that good, and I kind of skim through it, and it's like, oof, you know, it looks like it was filmed on an iPhone. I'm not dissing specific people or anything. I'm just saying that, you know, you're right. The best of the best will prevail. I'm not saying I prevailed. I didn't. There were much more popular people in that subreddit, but it's that oversaturation can easily kill a medium,
right?
In a genre, you know, a subgenre or whatever it may be. But
I think analog horror specifically is pretty resilient to it, which I think is interesting, because like post Marble Hornets, you know, you had Tribe 12. There's at least 3 other Slender Man ones that I'm blanking on. Like, there were 2 good ones, and the rest of them were like pretty dick riding real hard on the other ones. And it was like, yeah, you kind of did some unique things, but for the most part, like, I'd rather just watch the original. But like, it happens again and again, and you see the new ones that survive, and you see the other ones that just don't work, and they do not survive. And I think with already blank Mandela Catalog, you've seen 100 clones, and you've seen 100 bad clones, and like, there's going to be a couple that I think are going to make it out the mud, and they're really going to be interesting and unique. But yeah, it amazes me how well it seems to survive. I do think Mandela Catalog is one where I watch it and I can't help but think about all the bad clones of it, and it kind of taints watching it for me.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm getting at too with that folk filmmaking thing. I'll get off that just really quick, just because people get the wrong idea of what makes it great. You know, it was the scrappiness of it, and it was the diversity of voices that made it great, where it was, dude, anyone can do this. And that's what made it great. It's even like the Mr. Beast thing. I don't know if you've seen that, where it's like the Mr. Beastification of YouTube, where people see that and they go, oh, I can do today we're doing this. You know, and they're not making it their own, because Mr. Beast did a whole podcast. He talked about that, where he's like, I just did my own thing with it. And people are missing that part of it. What they're doing is they're seeing dollar signs and views, and they're going, oh, I can replicate that if I just do X, Y, Z. And it's like, okay, but they're watching Mr. Beast, A, because he makes interesting videos, and B, because it's him. It's his own voice. It's what he likes to do. And I feel like a lot of people aren't doing that. So, you know, I think he talked about it, how Sin City was a big influence on Mandela Catalog, the guy that made it. And how he was like, that was a huge part. And you see that in the visual style, how it's black and white and super contrast heavy and all this stuff. And, you know, I just think that if people took their own influences and put it in their own stuff,
Yeah.
like mine ends with a giant kaiju.
Yeah.
You know, it's like
pretty.
that's me. 100% if you know me.
Yeah.
I love the idea of body horror and like melting stuff, you know, and it's like, so taking what I find horrific and stuff that I normally couldn't do, because it's hard to do a kaiju movie with no budget. That's how I did it. It was just, you know, oh, we'll do it this analog horror style. Because I was working on a separate analog horror series before this, and it involved John McCain becoming president and all this wild stuff.
That's
like
real
this,
horror right
history
there.
thing, right? And I was going to do it in the style of a documentary, like a Ken Burns style thing where people were talking about it and looking back on all these events that happened. And it involved this giant monster and how John McCain completely fumbled the entire
response,
the entire response and all this stuff. And that was kind of like the way that it was set up and all this stuff. And he basically created this like fascist theocracy type, you know, government. It was just nuts. But anyways, and it was like, I need to do way more work than I, you know, originally thought I'd need to. But anyways, I feel like though when you blend all these weird ideas together and you take the format of something how it works, that's when you can get it to succeed. Not when you go scary faces and an alternate. Because I've seen, I don't think this person will ever see it, but they were in one of my film classes and they did a full on, like they even said they were alternates, and it was this whole like short horror thing, and it was just like, and someone even called them out and they're like, dude, you should have just done your own thing and called it something separate. And there was even a part where they were like the person was like looking in through a window, and I'm thinking, have they seen
what you did?
What I did?
Yeah.
And then they like, not knowing that was actually me in the class, and I'm not trying to like stroke my ego here. I'm just saying, because like I'm not in that short film. Did they maybe see it and not, you know, not even think, because that is a pretty popular one. But I'm just saying, I just think that was really kind of telling of like, well, this is where it's kind of heading, is people misunderstanding what makes a series great, and instead just, you know, to kind of get off that though. But
you know, I think you're always gonna have that. I forgot exactly what you just said that brought it to my attention, but like I always think about this one interview with like Young Lean and Drain Gang, and I want to say it was Nardwar, but I could be wrong. And they were like, why do you make music? And he goes, because nobody makes what I want to listen to. And it's like,
that's an attitude that I love. I want to make like Pesticide, my second
like if
feature
something's
film.
Cool, appreciate it. Don't try to make it your own. Like that's just like ego taking over.
I feel like I'm always talking about my stuff, but I'm just using it as an example because I know it the best. Is when I made Pesticide, is I wanted to make a movie that was like Pulp Fiction and Gummo having a kid and then having it adopted by Gus Van Sant. Like that was like the gist of like what I wanted, and I'm like, no movie exists like this, I'll make it. That's what I wanted to do. And I feel like when you have that attitude, you're gonna succeed.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it, kind of like it's
a
very elementary idea of like, you do have to make something unique, but like most people think that their personality and like themselves is enough to make something stand out. And it's like, no, your product exists outside of you. What you make is not, you can't contain yourself within a film. You know?
I feel like where analog is heading right now is reminiscent of the slasher films of the 80s, with how it was like Halloween was a big success, and you could say that was like the local 58. And then Friday the 13th was huge, you know, and you could say that was Gemini. And then Nightmare on Elm Street did really, really well, and that came a little bit later on, right when it was starting to kind of go up, and you could say that was Mandela. And then after that, it was just like shit. Like, you got some fun ones like Child's Play, because it was like, what if a doll was the killer? But everything else, like, you know, I think it's called My Bloody Valentine.
Maybe,
I don't know, but it's, you know, there's ones like that where it was like the extremity was what attracted people's attention, of these kills are so horrific that, you know, and they're so gory. But it was like there was a million slasher movies in the 80s, and so many people forget about, like, it's like, okay, I kind of know what a sleepaway camp is. You know, it's like that type of stuff, where the more extreme stuff was what got attention. And I think that's what we're going to start seeing now with analog horror. Like, I remember there was this one analog horror series that was really controversial, where it was literally involving children being, we'll say, violated and murdered. Right? You know what I'm talking about?
I don't know the name of this.
And even if I knew it, I probably wouldn't want to say it to give them attention.
Enough,
but, you know, it's like, but that got attention because it was extreme. And you can look even at Vita Carnis, where the content may not be as extreme, but the presentation of it is, of these really good props and puppets, you know, and that's what draws people to it. And I think that's what we're going to start seeing now is, why should I care about this? What's immediate that I notice? Is it the content that's extreme? Is it this that's extreme? I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think one thing, I think you hit the nail on the head again with the idea of we are kind of seeing like a resurgence of slashers. I think the name of the movie is Black Christmas, but SKINAMARINK referenced it like 100 times in the film, like shot for shot. Like shots are just straight ripped from Black Christmas, and like SKINAMARINK is a great movie.
I was going to get into SKINAMARINK a little bit.
I think but then the other thing that I think we're seeing as a whole in the art world and creation in general is we're very slowly, but I think it's going to ramp up very quickly, is we're returning to caring about craftsmanship. Because I mean, I think a lot of people, and I mean, I'm a fan of modern art and like postmodernity as a whole. Like I think a lot of concept and performance art is pretty neat, but everyone, I think, is kind of getting bored of it. And it's like, let's see something that you had to own your craft to really create. Let's see something that is beautiful, something that is very skillful and talented. And I think
elicits emotion first and foremost.
And I think we're seeing like the return to like, wow, you put a lot of effort into that. That is very well done. Like people are appreciating that again. It's not just conceptual, it's physical. And I think that's part of why SKINAMARINK took off, is that like, it does take a level of skill and like craftsmanship to create that kind of atmosphere, because nobody has ever done it before. I do think it's a wholly unique film.
So SKINAMARINK was created by Kyle Edward Ball, and he started out doing these YouTube videos that are stylistically analog horror, but they really aren't. Because it was dreams and nightmares that people had.
Submitted it, and he went, that's sick. I'm going to make that real.
Yeah, he would like narrate it a little bit, and most of the ambience was just from having this harsh noise in the background, seeing these degraded videography stuff. Like his work, when I first watched it, like you have to watch in the perfect setting, and it's in your room, lights out, headphones on.
I saw it in theaters, and I thought that was perfect.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I liked it.
I haven't seen that yet. The like I didn't see it in theaters. I asked you if you wanted to go, and you're like, I already saw it, and I'm like, shit, okay, I guess I'm not seeing it, because I don't want to see it by myself. I'm a pussy. Anyways.
I mean, I was just like, from a sheer like emotional level, like my girlfriend thought I was gonna have a heart attack, because like my heart was racing. I was genuinely terrified. And I think where it ties into analog horror is I think a very specific thing is he puts the camera on the ground. Like it's from the height of like a 7-year-old, like a child, but like it sits still, not in the way that a child would. And again, I think it reaches to that one step of separation from authenticity, where like it is emulating the view of a child, but it is not the point of view of the child. And I think that's one of the biggest and most universal concepts in analog horror, is like 1 degree of separation.
Well, I think another thing that works really well with it too is, I don't think you ever see the kids' faces once, right?
I don't think so. I think you see like their legs. That's
you see their legs and like the outline of them, their silhouette or whatever. That right there immediately, in my opinion, makes it scarier, because you don't have anything to connect to at all in the entire movie. And the other thing too is like, you see that a lot of times in horror films too, where you see a lot of wide shots where they're just kind of out in the open, or it's almost like a POV shot where you see something where it's like in the bushes watching them. And like you said, because the camera wasn't moving, it has that sort of feeling of predatory, like it's watching these people, like voyeurism in a way. You know what I mean? And I feel like that played a big factor in why that film worked so well. And also just the lighting. Because wasn't the film just lit by a TV? Like that was it?
Yeah, pretty much. And and I mean the lack of lighting too. Like
that's what I mean.
I assume it was maybe, I don't know if intentional is the right word, but it was very important to the experience, was being in the movie theater and the film grain. Like when you're staring into a blank doorway and you're seeing the movement and like the shifts in the film grain, you constantly feel like there's something in that doorway. And the creator very clearly wants you to think that, but like, oh man, like every grain felt like an eyeball. You couldn't stop thinking about it.
What's that one painting where it's like an open door and then there's just like a void inside the door? You know what I'm talking about? It's been referenced in so many movies. Like I know that Barry referenced it recently. You know, it's like a door that's like slightly ajar and then there's like nothing in there, and it's supposed to be like, you know, either way, I feel like that kind of embodied that painting as a movie, basically, of like there's no humans that you're really looking at. You have nothing to relate to, just this emptiness. And that's I don't know, I without getting too pretentious, but you know what I mean? Like I feel like the more vague the better in that specific instance. I mean, with a lot of movies it doesn't work like that at all. But
and one of the other things I think that ties SKINAMARINK into analog horror is like, it's very, I think postmodern is probably the best way to describe it. It addresses a cultural concern in a very vague and abstract way. And I think it touches on temporality very well, in the sense that, I mean, can I spoil the film in it?
Go for it. Yeah.
At the end, there's a scene where the kid is bleeding into the carpet, and then he disappears, and the kid is bleeding into the carpet again, and he disappears.
Yeah, loops.
And then the building starts stretching, and time basically ceases to exist as a concept throughout the whole film. And I think that really touches on like our current condition as humankind. We are concerned with how time is moving. Like, I don't know if you've heard of the book The End of History.
No.
It basically argues that our current like geopolitical climate is the end of it. Like, nothing's ever going to change. And Mark Fisher talks about this in his books a lot. We constantly are so nostalgic for the past because we can't imagine a future. There's no ability to address the future anymore. And I think that SKINAMARINK kind of hits that note perfectly of the idea of like, these kids can't even imagine the future anymore. And I think that's part of the fear, is that like, it kind of forces you to reflect on the fact that like, you don't even know what the world's going to look like. You can't come up, you can't dream of a future anymore, you know?
And like, you know, I'll be lying awake at night and just being like, cause I mean, I'm a Christian. I know that you aren't, right?
Mostly.
Yeah.
I don't.
So it's like, for me though, sometimes I'll have these moments of doubt, which I think is natural in any spiritualistic, you know, beliefs of like, well, what if I die and there's nothing?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and there's just something that that kind of like shakes me to my core, where it's like, I mean, obviously, isn't there that whole fallacy of like, it's if you believe in God, it's a W, because if you die and there's no heaven, at least you believed in God. Yeah. If you die and there's heaven, you go to heaven. Yeah. But if you don't believe in God and you die and there's no heaven, oh well, you die, or you die, you don't believe in God, you go to hell. So it's like, it's an ultimate win.
Yeah, no matter what. Yeah.
You know what I mean? But just that idea though of there being nothingness, and how, you know, I talked to this when I was in, this is a little bit off topic, but we'll kind of touch upon it, is I took this one class when I was a freshman, and we were making, it was like clay. And one of my people at like the table or whatever, she was a senior, and she was talking about how she had gotten into a car wreck the year before, and she was pronounced dead on the scene. Like she was dead for 2 minutes, and they brought her back.
Wow.
And she said that it was just nothingness, and that always just shook me. Like, it's like her senses slowly went away.
Yeah.
And it was like, there wasn't a light. It was just, she was just kind of lying there, and she slowly lost, like, I think she said the last thing she lost, or almost lost, was hearing. Oh. She could still hear the sirens and everything, and she could feel the, you know, the EKG or whatever. Yeah. And then, but then it was like, then it's like, it was a jump cut almost, and then she was in the hospital. And she honestly thought then that she was in heaven when she was in the hospital, because it was just white light, you know?
Right.
But, and then she said that kind of just stopped her from being Christian, was because she realized that there was like nothing. And
wow,
you know, obviously I believe her, don't get me wrong, but I'm saying that, which by the way, we're like making clay pots and we're having these like deep conversations, like, what? And it was just like, fuck, okay, this is a nice way to end my school day as a 14-year-old. But anyways, you know, it's like, whether or not you choose to believe that, I think it doesn't really matter. Yeah. You know what I mean? I do agree with you that that's where some of that horror comes from, is the doubt. Yeah. The doubt of the future, the doubt of, are they human? The doubt of, you know, that kind of stuff, where even when you think something is true, you don't really know. One of the most horrific stories I've ever heard is that one guy where he got into this fight. He was knocked out, but then this woman was there that like helped him, and then eventually they fell in love, got married, had kids. And one day he's sitting in his living room, he sees a lamp, and he just keeps staring at it for days. Yeah. And then he realizes that the lamp isn't real. And then it's like he closed his eyes, he opened them, he was still in the parking lot. The woman wasn't there. It was all like it was all like a hallucination. But he really lived those 20 years. And so for him, he was just like, it was like soul crushing.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of ties into SKINAMARINK, that idea of time not being a thing anymore.
Yeah.
To where you're just like, I've lived stuff that I didn't actually live, but I felt like I lived it. I don't know, I just want to know what your take kind of on that. That's my interpretation of SKINAMARINK and why that's horrifying. I want to know more, as long-winded as it was. I went into religion and time and lamps.
That's how it goes. But I think the time concept is specifically like the scariest part of SKINAMARINK. And what I'm noticing is that my taste in media as a whole is very geared towards more abstract concepts like that. Like, I read this blog post that basically argued that the reason hyperpop is so cool is because it completely disregards like the musical conception of time, and it approaches what's referred to as like hyperrhythm or hypermelody, where a melody just speeds up to the point where it becomes a single note, and that single note turns into a new melody, and rhythm is compressed into single notes and turned into hyperrhythms. And I mean, that's probably why I enjoy the genre so much. But I'm noticing that, like with SKINAMARINK, I noticed that with a lot of analog horror mediums, is that they're touching on a very post-humanist conception of like what our fears should be. Because it's like, if you look at like the cultural fears in like the 70s or in like the 2000s, it's home invasions, it's terrorism, and it's like foreigners, like,
and Satanism
and Satan. Yeah. Like, those are like the big four, and those are very immediate, grounded in like fear of other humans. And I think what we're seeing now is that our fears are beyond like human conception now.
Yeah.
They're such abstract fears of like, what if we were wrong about time moving forward in a linear fashion? And it's like, what if we were wrong about humans even existing? What if like our conception of like, I'm a human, therefore I have these rights, these privileges. I am separate from animals. I'm a unique individual. We're starting to see like this very universal media criticism of these ideas, where it's like, what if some of us aren't humans? What if we're alternates? What if humanity as a whole doesn't exist? What if we're no different than these animals? And what if these animals are smarter than us? What if our conception of linear time is wrong? And it's like, our current fears are so like astral and like metaphysical now that like, I think a lot of people, I mean, I'm totally a victim of this. I don't even recognize what the fears being addressed in some of this media is. It's like, wow, that's a cool looking scary face, you know? And that's what I'm worried about. And the author is worried about whether or not he exists, you know?
Yeah.
And the fears are so much different from like the last 20 years. And I think that's probably where horror is going to go in the future, is that like, if we ever do solve the issue of like, are we actually human? Is time actually linear? We're going to move on to the next problem, and we're going to be terrified about it for a solid 20 years, and maybe we'll figure it out, or maybe we'll all die, you know? Like, I wonder what the fears of the future are going to be, because we're very quickly escaping physical fear of like, I'm worried someone is going to break into my house and kill me. And we're already to the point where we're passing like the idea of like, do we even exist? Like, when we, what's after that cosmic fear? I can't even conceptualize what comes after that, you know?
Like, I think with, like you said, with the home invasion, we'll use that for an example. I still think that type of horror can be done well. Like, Funny Games.
Not familiar.
You're not familiar? I think that's what it's called. If it's not, I'll have a thing up on screen, or I'll just cut this out entirely. So these people break into this home. There's this couple there. In the whole movie, it's this French extremism movie. So I'm sure you can already understand where this is going to go. Pretty much torture them for 90 minutes.
Sounds about right.
That's the movie. But it's effective, and it holds up today. Because it's so gruesome, and it's so blunt with how it's shot. And I think that bluntness carries over to a lot of analog horror. The deaths that happen on screen, it is presented just as is. Like, there's this one, I can't remember what the series was, but they were basically like 800 children went missing, you know, this past year. And, you know, you just kind of see that, and it just almost like it goes past you, but you really think about that. 800 children. I mean, regardless of, you know, the number one. That's 2 parents that are affected by it. Assuming it's a nuclear family, that's 4 grandparents that are affected by it. You know, just thinking about that specific, that one, and how that's glazed over like that, that's horrific to me. Even if 800 is extreme or however many it wasn't. But I remember it was some big number and someone was like, that's way too many. But still, though, the fact, though, that it was that many, you know, it's like, and it was just glazed over that quick is what's so horrific in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah.
And that concept of just like being a statistic more than anything.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much of the Vintage 8 stuff that I've sent you've seen, but that feels like a universal concern in that series is like indifference to things. Because I mean, kind of a minor spoiler alert, an entire parish of Louisiana turns into lizard people and nobody cares. There are like space viruses that threaten humankind itself, and half of the humans on the planet are actually also different space viruses, and nobody cares. Like everyone is completely indifferent to that. And I mean, it almost felt like predictive in a sense, because we just had that whole Congress meeting about aliens, and I saw like 3 tweets about it. Like they could have just been like, yep, there's aliens, they're actually running the whole world, and we would have been like, well, that's cool, what's the next Marvel movie coming out?
Right.
You know
well, the
saying?
GOP debate was last night. And they literally asked Chris Christie, what do you think about all the recent UFO stuff? And I just think, like, could you imagine if they asked that question at a debate in the 80s? It would have caused a frenzy. But because it's like you said, we're so apathetic now, it's like, okay, whatever, there's aliens, who gives, who you know, who cares? What's going on Twitter right now? Like no one on Twitter was even talking about it. And I was just like, am I going crazy? Like, am I the only one who saw this specific moment? Like, we are literally talking about extraterrestrials and no one cares. And I think you're right about that. That is a very profound part of this like apathetic view that we're all kind of living in right now. And
I think there's an almost optimistic tone to the Vintage 8 series, where there's usually like individuals who are concerned about it, and it feels empowering, because in the, I believe it's the one titled Tangi Virus, there's the doctor who discovers like basically the alien virus and is working on a cure for it while she's infected by it. And I mean, that is one of the most brutal pieces of horror I've ever seen. That last scene, I won't spoil it for you if you ever want to watch it, but
link it to me so I can include it in the video.
It is horrific. It is like a 6-minute slow burn of like the most like soul crushing horror I've seen in a while. But it's also uniquely like uplifting, and it kind of creates the I mean, maybe not the most appropriate term, but like the Ubermensch idea of like, yes, as an individual you can rise to the occasion and you can push back against something that feels just utterly soul crushing. And it's nice to see kind of that optimistic take, especially in horror. I have no doubt that within the next 3 years, we're going to see a very similar series where they take that sort of Ubermensch characteristic and they just stomp all over it and kind of go towards a very nihilist theme of like, yeah, there's nothing you can do about it. It's over. You're just done for. Just give up, dude. Might as well, you know? But I don't know how that'll play out, but I feel like we'll see the continuation of the sort of super heroic idea of saving the world ingrained in media, you know?
Kind of piggybacking off that, the Backrooms are also widely successful, and this is mainly my point, because I feel like the Backrooms have been discussed constantly, and you can talk about liminality till you're blue in the face, liminal spaces and all that type of stuff. But what I'm getting at is, I think that it's both good and bad that A24 picked it up. Obviously, it's great that this filmmaker is getting a voice.
Especially he's our age.
I think he's younger. I think he's still in high school.
He was 17 when he started. I know that much. Wow.
And you know, that's phenomenal. The fact that this young filmmaker is getting a voice, you know, and getting this movie deal. You know, I think it's incredible. That's not bad. What I think it has the potential to be bad is Hollywood seeing the success of SKINAMARINK and obviously this Backrooms movie, unless it's god awful, which I don't think it will be. If you know, it'll obviously be a success, right? Backrooms and SKINAMARINK, they're probably going to be box office success. I mean, SKINAMARINK already was, but I think they're going to see that and go, ah, yes, analog horror is the future of horror. And they're going to take it in the worst direction possible.
And mass produce it.
Yes. All you have to see is that boom of found footage stuff that happened in the 2000s. And all the garbage that was pumped out because it was cheap and easy to make. And I don't want that to happen to this genre, but I feel like it's already happening with how many people have been making their own analog horror series because it's so accessible, like found footage. Found footage is, we'll just have a camera going and just talk bullshit for 50 minutes, have something scary happen for 20 minutes. We got a movie. That's it. You can make it for nothing.
And it's interesting to see that, like, 15 years ago when an independent artist came up with a cool concept, the big box office took it and ran it into the ground.
Yeah.
We're doing it ourselves now. Like,
yes.
So many people it's like auto exploitation at this point. We're like, as independent artists, people are taking new concepts that could be done really well and just driving them into the ground before anyone else even has a chance to. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And like, I think we're going to see that really speed up to the point where like, you're going to see like a singularity where it's like, well, I don't care if this concept doesn't run into the ground anymore. I'm going to make it anyway. And I think that could be very liberating, but I also think it could be very crushing. I don't know which way it'll go. I
agree completely, because you kind of got that almost with the Godzilla films in the Heisei era. Right before that happened, you had I'll be really quick about this for those that don't know. There's different eras of Godzilla. By the 70s, Godzilla had run its course. It was maybe like 16 movies in 15. I don't know the exact number. And Terror of Mechagodzilla was not that successful at the box office. So they went, okay, we're going to put a cap on this for a while.
Yeah.
Because they'd become so oversaturated with these Japanese kaiju flicks, these tokusatsu movies. They had shows about them. It was just so saturated. And then they came up with Return of Godzilla in 1984, 1985, because it kind of came out around that time in America and Japan. And they basically were like, even though it's not as popular anymore, because they basically killed their own genre, they went, let's try to bring it back by bringing it back to the OG, to the 54 movie, and do our own take on that. And it was so successful that they made like 6 more in the Heisei series, and they were the best of the entire franchise. Objectively, like, they are the best. And I think that's what's going to happen with some genres where people go, this worked really well. I want to make a callback to Local 58. We'll make it more in line with that as opposed to whatever's popular now. And we'll see that, like you said, that singularity of like, it comes to a head and it becomes even better. Yeah. That's where I think it's actually heading in 10 years. If you want to kind of get to this point and wrap it up. Yeah. I think it's only going to go up from here in small dosages. Yeah. It's going to be very hard to find it. But when you do find
it's not hard enough to find already.
Right. Yeah. But I'm saying, like, looking for the best. Like, there's going to be like the Scrimblow tapes. There's going to be a million Scrimblow tapes where it's like a scary face in the corner. But there will never be a million Mandela catalogs or a million Local 58s or a million Gemini Home Entertainments or a million Vita Carnuses. There's only going to be, one of those. And if someone with a distinct voice can come up with their own, they'll succeed. Right. And this medium will work regardless of what cultural movements happen, in my opinion. I just want to know your take on it.
Yeah, for the most part, I'm pretty optimistic of it working. Because, I mean, you can already see, like, people are very adept at switching up and trying something new. Like, the shift from, like, 80s to 90s analog horror into digital horror into video game horror, where we're creating video games that people are trapped into. Yeah. And we've seen horror about virtual reality already. Black Mirror's pretty on top of that, even though they're not really the same area of footage film. But I think very quickly we're going to have to come up with new things. But my one interest and fear in it is that we went through the 80s, we went through the 90s, we went through the early and mid 2000s. We're kind of through the 10s at this point. Like, what happens when we catch up to the present? Like, I wonder if we're going to be able... I don't doubt that we're going to start seeing, like, post-apocalyptic found footage. Like, catastrophic event happened. We're already kind of seeing that. But
there's a really good one, too. It's called, like, Creatures of the Fog. Fantastic. Joe and I watched it. We're like, this is one of the best things I've ever seen. It's only like a minute long. I'll send it to you. Okay. It's incredible. Yeah. Anyways. Yeah. So it's already kind of happening with that post-apocalyptic.
We're caught up. We're going to move into the future. But like, I really want to see what happens afterward. Because like, people are going to have to make unique ideas to stand out. Yeah. And then when they stand out, I'm going to see them. And then I'll know like, oh, this is what's next. And this is what's already happened, Yeah. But so to wrap it all up, is analog horror the future of horror? Yes or no? Just one word. No.
I think no. That about wraps it up, everybody. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. I'm Cole McCormack.
I'm Dylan Osvatic.
You're watching Firewood Media. Stay tuned for more podcasts. I hope to do more of these in the future. Stay tuned for October because I'm doing daily horror movie reviews. There's 31 in total. They're all stop motion stuff. Every Harryhausen movie. Every Tim Burton movie. I mean, I'm going ham on this. Unreal. You're going to be in the Jan Schwenkmeyer video. So
I'd like to. Yeah, we'll see how
it's going to be this wild thing. So anyways, thank you so much for watching.